you and I think we first met in Los Angeles,
Yeah,
or maybe it was a Gary Con. I can't remember which
no,
one.
I think we met at Joe's place. I think,
Yeah,
went over to run a game for Joe Manganiello at his place, and that's where I met you. I think we chatted online prior to that, but in person, that was the first time I met you. And then you came to a Gary Con like 11, I think. I think that's right.
10 or 11. I think I have a
Yeah.
coin somewhere here. At Gary Con. Um, Interesting the folks that you get to meet and how incredibly open and friendly they are. That's why I always say, Gary Con's my favorite convention. Um, and it's a chance for fans of gaming in general to meet some incredible movers and shakers from the past and present.
Yeah, and that's on purpose that it's like that. When I wanted to kind of recreate at GaryCon how I had remembered early conventions in Lake Geneva, whether it was a Gen Con, which was relatively small back then, but more so like Spring Revel and Winter Fantasies, which were little regional conventions of maybe a couple hundred, people. And as a boy, I'd be able to walk around and just go up to a table and see a game that people were playing and be like, "Oh, what are you playing?" And they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, we're doing this. Hey, sit down, kid. I'll teach you how to play." Right? And they were very welcoming and warm, and everybody felt part of a community very very much. And then later on, I was in California. I was in the Army, and went to, I can't remember which con it was. It was a con in the Bay, and I don't want to name them, but I went there and I wanted to play test a scenario I was working on for GaryCon. As many years ago, it was probably GaryCon 6 or 7, so over 10 years ago. And I was walking around, and it seemed people did not seem very friendly or welcoming. But I walked up to a table of games. I just said, "Hey, what are you guys playing?" And they all looked at me like, "How dare you even speak to us?" And I just kind of like, they didn't really answer. And so I was like, "Okay, see you later." I did that at a couple of tables, and I thought, wow, this is really not a fun environment if you're here to learn about gaming or are new to the community. So I very much wanted GaryCon to be a place where it was about gaming. It wasn't about an exposition center. It was about having a good time in the community and the good times that you have meeting people and sharing adventures around the table. And that kind of spills over into a social environment where, if you're having a Coke or a beer or whatever it is in the bar area in the lobby, you can strike up conversations. And you're absolutely right. At GaryCon, you may be chatting with Zeb Cook or Larry Elmore just like you would any other person, any other gamer that's there, because it's a very relaxed and warm environment.
Yeah, my first Gary Con, I think I ran a few games, but I don't think signed up for all that much. I just kind of hung out in the open gaming area that's outside the Artists Enclave, and
Yeah,
I was never bored. It was just constantly people, hey, we need another person for this, or you want to learn how to play that game, and um,
absolutely. I left that part, but you're 100% right, Matt. I specifically said Gary Con is about gaming. If there's an empty seat, that's a waste. If there's a seat at the table, I want people to be able to walk up and feel comfortable saying, "Hey, can I join?" And people say yes. So we use a card system on the table. So they'll be like one of those little, wire stands, and there'll be a green card up if they have room to take somebody and they're not too far into the adventure to welcome someone in, or a red card, so oh, they're busy right now, they can't take us. But if you look around and see a green card on any one of the tables, walk up and say, "Can I join?" There's no tickets, there's no cost, there's none of that. It's all included in the badge. Jump in and play games, because that's what it's about. It's about playing games, and you get to meet new people that way too. My friend Jim Scatch has been coming since GaryCon 1, and I didn't know him at the time. I only met him through GaryCon, but I know him now. And he one year he forgot to sign up for any events. It just slipped his mind, and so he showed up, and he just played games. It's called Going Commando. So he recommends everyone goes commando to GaryCon once, where you just show up and see what games are available. And he said some of his best games were by just showing up, looking at what was available, and walking into a game. And he met some really wonderful people and had some great experiences.
yeah, and the incredible number of just pickup games that go on, and the Order of the Owl is always taking
Oh,
people, you
so
know.
good. Yeah, Mark Janorak and his team do an outstanding job. And again, it's going to be story time here. I'm sorry. I guess that's why we're unscripted. So my attorney, unfortunately, I have to have some attorneys sometimes. Very nice lady. I've gotten to know her over the past 6 years very well. She came with her family and her friends son, I think he's 12, maybe 13, and he's a bit socially awkward, right? As many of us are at that age. And he was just having just a heck of a time at school and making friends, that sort of thing. So he came to Gary Con, and about 10 or 11 in the morning, he bumped into the guys from Order of the Owl and said, "Well, this looks fun. Can I play?" And they're like, "Well, yes." One of them got up from the table, let him jump in and play. He played all day long until his mom made him leave at like 9 o'clock at night. And he's like, "This is fantastic. I love it. I found my thing. I want to do more and more of this." And I've heard that similar stories. And so Order of the Owl, fantastic, great AD&D, and they just run and run and run like all day long, like at least 18 hours, maybe 24 sometimes. And they have a team of GMs that do that. But very welcoming. They teach them the ropes, and people fall in love with it. And it's just a great organization. And honestly, that experience of that young man, I've seen replicated over and over again literally around the globe, where young people have come up and said, "Man, just a year or two ago, I felt really lonely and didn't have friends, and it was hard for me to socialize. And then I found Dungeons and Dragons, and now I have friends, and I feel like I belong to a community, and this is so awesome." And then they tell me about their adventures and what's going on, and it's always like a great it just it just makes it really important, reminds me how important it is to keep the message out there and spread the news that, role playing is good fun and it's also really beneficial. So I love that, in Order of the Owl, and Mark and his team are great people.
Yeah, and I've said, I think I talked to Tim Kask about this, but
Yeah.
my thing, I always said, and this might sound a little melodramatic, but I always felt like I kind of owed a little bit of a debt to gaming, because when I was younger, I had a lot of learning disabilities, and late 70s, you had the option of you know, being shoved in some class where they could ignore you, or you basically struggled had that personal struggle to overcome those disabilities. And for me, I didn't really care for reading, boring things, but my brother started bringing home these AD&D books, and I was hooked. And my parents recognized that, and they said, "Well, if you read these books and you learn these rules, we'll buy you anything D&D you want." And that was the motivation for me that really helped push through those disabilities and allowed me to, like, because the people that my parents talked to said, "Oh, he's never going to go to college, find him a trade somewhere, have him digging ditches or whatever." And you know proved them all wrong. But I do think that the foundation was gaming, which is, most people would associate with just fun, but I think it can be so much more than that. Um,
I
but
think that's the trick, is that you play role playing games because you think you're just having a good time, right? You're just doing it for entertainment. And but there's a side effect of useful life skills that comes out of it. It's very sneaky. It's very tricky. I don't know that it was intended by my father. In fact, I'm pretty certain it wasn't. But yeah, there's a bunch of positive benefits that come out of it. And I've heard stories similar to yours, Matt, uh, hundreds, probably thousands of times, if I include, emails and texts or social media and forum posts. So many people struggled with a learning disability, dyslexia, or whatever it may be. Uh, social anxiety, where they felt like they're paralyzed with fear to speak to other people. Yet by taking on a persona in a game, they then were outside of themselves and learned how to adapt, and then they could apply those skills. I guess they're fungible skills, maybe, or they're transferable to real life, right? So just if they practice talking to people as their character, well, guess what? They could then go talk to people in school or wherever it was, and those were transferable, as well as like decision, problem solving, small group dynamics, persuasion, all those things are great. And as a DM, of course, you're learning storytelling and how to create interesting characters, how to really get your party to dive into the story. I think one of the best ways is creating good villains who return again and again to thwart them, and when they escape. And then, of course, once you finally corner that evil villain and the culmination of a series, it's really satisfying to defeat them and move on. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's actually something I want to swing back to in a second because I think there is a big difference between um, modern gaming and that first, second edition experience,
Yeah.
um, where characters today are kind of much more standalone, whereas in the old days it felt like you needed a team. They all played a role. Um,
Everything is a lot more homogenous now as far as how characters are created and what decisions is acceptable and who is good and who is bad. Everything's a lot more gray than it used to be.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right in the it's homogenous in the sense of uh, I think all the experience point, going up a level is the same for everybody. Pretty much everybody has a longsword, if you want to put it that way. I can throw cantrips that do the same damage as a weapon, right? Even if, as a spellcaster, I don't really have to worry about resource management that much. And so it does smooth that out a lot more. Whereas in, early, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is probably what I'm most familiar with in that sense. You know, your magic users, wizards today, started off a bad armor class. I was gonna say a high armor class, but that was bad in AD&D, right? So they did have a poor armor class, very poor hit points, poor ability to fight, and they had one first level spell. One. That's it. And you had to roll for it. It might be a not a great spell either, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and then you had to survive and you slowly gain some power. But at fifth level, you had the opportunity to cast, that's kind of where your power band kicks in because you got area of effect spells that were damage producing, like Fireball, Lightning Bolt, and things like that. And that could drastically turn combats where, hey, there's 50 orcs coming at you. Great. Fireball, I've killed them all, right? Whereas if you're even a fifth level fighter, that's a lot of orcs attacking you, and they can get lucky and hit you, and you could go down, right? So, and so everybody kind of had their capabilities. Fighters were good up front and engaging, in combat. Clerics were mostly healing and some support spells. You had your thieves, rogue types who were disarming traps, sneaking around and collecting information, kind of like scouts, on the battlefield. And your wizards were like artillery, right? So you had like kind of a medical corps, combat arms, artillery or artillery air support, maybe sort of similar, and then scouts and that sort of stuff. So scouts and engineers, I guess, because they also disarm traps. So there's a little bit of engineering in there. If you're an army guy, you understand what I'm talking about. And so you did want all of those components. If you went in with just fighters, okay, first combat you're probably okay, but then your hit points start
Eventually,
getting worn out, right? And there's
yeah.
nobody there to refresh it or if somebody goes down, you're done, right? You're either if you're lucky enough to be able to stabilize them, then you're carrying them out, or they might just be dead and you're carrying their body. So yeah, all sorts of bad news. And obviously, if you're all thieves or wizards or whatever, there's all those. You're not well balanced, as you said very succinctly, and I took like 10 minutes to explain the same thing.
Well, and also when you don't have that distinction between all the different classes and everyone's just homogenous, I find that it also doesn't build this level of teamwork that we
Mhm.
really had in some of the original D&D versions.
yeah,
Absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I talk about that during I do like a growing up Gygax presentation at conventions. And that is part of what I talk about is the team building. And you're right, because you have to learn the strengths and weaknesses of the people in your, not only the people, but also the characters they're playing, right? Because let's admit, some people are better at certain things than others, and also their characters are better at certain stuff.
Yeah.
So you gotta learn the people and the characters they're playing, and you have to be able to come together and figure out how to best utilize what skills you have to overcome the obstacles in front of you. And that, you're right, that builds reliance on each other. And of course, whoever's the most persuasive in advancing their way to do it also is, kind of gaining skills and small group dynamics.
You think that's negatively impacted our players as far as how D&D can help people overcome social skills and having this world where you don't have that same level of team dynamics now? Do you think that's affected the average player?
I don't believe so because the important part is that you're showing up at, with a group of people. You're all sharing that time together. You're not staring at a screen, right? Because a lot of people, we do that either at work and then at phone, just look around when you're
All the time.
eating at dinner, people are looking at their phone as opposed to talking to each other, right? And so I think just getting that engagement face to face with people, having a conversation, getting uh, engrossed in a story that you help kind of develop and decide how things turn out. I think that really probably fills that need. But I do agree that some of the bonding may be a little bit lessened if you don't rely on one another. But I'd have to say it's really going to be more on die rolls than because your epic moments come from great die rolls more so than that cooperation, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this and I critted, then that's a big deal. But you could crit as the rogue in combat and be just as successful as the fighter types.